Welcome to another edition of Pinot with Pag and Panettieri, brought to you by the folks at N-able. We discuss the critical role that MSPs play in the small business ecosystem and where your business could be heading next to succeed. Got a question for us? Post it in the comments area and we'll try to cover it in a future edition.
John, great to see you again.
Hey, Joe, nice to connect. How are you? How have you been?
I've been really good, thanks. No complaints at all. Staying super busy in the industry, enjoying the industry, actually. So many MSPs are so either busy scaling their businesses or thinking about M&A, et cetera. So it's always a fun time, but it's been especially fun lately. But I tell you what's front of mind that I'm hearing, and I wanted to bounce this off you. MSPs are learning the inflation word. They seem to be talking a lot about inflation. Is that unique to me, or is that what you're hearing?
No, it's definitely top of mind. I mean, and you're right. Like spring is definitely in the air, right? And the world is abuzz. I think we're all excited to get outside and get going and get back to the office again. And you're right. I mean, so typically, Joe, when we talk to MSPs, and I talk to MSPs quite a bit, they always bring up labor scarcity. They'll bring up security. They'll bring up cloud transformation. But there's a new ingredient that's definitely top of mind, and that is inflation. It's I was with a group of about 30 MSPs in North Carolina from all over eastern part of the United States and Canada, and the topic of inflation, price increases was top of mind, and really how they should think about it, and how it's going to impact them.
Yeah, without a doubt. So yeah, you have inflation, you have the talent shortage. You have that pricing conversation. If everything else is going up and my cost of services are going up, do I need to raise prices? But the other thing that goes hand in hand with the inflation conversation, I think, is the interest rate hikes. Now, not that it's a major trend yet, but I feel like the writing's on the wall in terms of where we may go with inflation rates. Do you see these as two battling forces, the inflation and the interest rate hikes, and how may that play out with the MSPs?
They're definitely two opposing forces, but you're right. It's good to kind of back up and untangle them a little bit and think about how it impacts our MSPs and our industry, right? And so, look, in 2021 we clearly had inflation, right? And the CPI was up, even excluding gas and food. It was high. Estimates in the U.S. and abroad is that that's going to continue in 2022, right? So what is the Fed doing here in the United States, in the UK and Europe? I think other than Japan, right now, folks are looking to increase interest rates. So we have two things. So they're increasing the interest rate to try to curb spending, to lower that inflation. But I think one will have a more of a short-term impact than the other. So like for me, the inflation, we're seeing that reflected in MSPs as a pressure on wages, right? As they're trying to retain their employees, we're seeing that, and they'll need to figure out how to retain their folks and deal with wage increases. We're seeing that in a lot of increase in software vendors and just vendors in general, right? I'm an Amazon Prime member, and I got that price increase there. And we're also seeing it in services, right? Whether it be your legal services, your insurance services, cyber insurance, errors and omissions type of insurance. Those are a lot of prices, and you add all of those up, and that's putting a lot of pressure on MSPs, on their profit, on their EBITDA, and on their bottom line. And so you have that, and then to your other question on the Fed rates and the cost of money. Look, you and I have been on this planet long enough, Joe, to know we're at historic lows, right? I remember when I financed and bought my first house, I think my interest rate was like 7.5% or something like that, right? So we're at historic lows.
John, it sounds high today, but I was in the same range. This was the 1990s, but I remember my father and my grandfather not my grandfather, my father and my uncle talking about interest rates 12, 14, 15, 16% in the 80s.
16, 17%. My dad tells me the same story. So you're absolutely, it's still a lot of cheap money out there, right? And we saw that here in the United States, the Fed bumped up by 25 bips in March, and there might be some additional ones, but by and large, it's still cheap money. And so I think the inflation is impacting MSPs right now today. It's top of mind because it's hitting their bottom line right now. I think the increases on the cost of money is more of a medium-term thing that I believe will be more of a moderate impact on the industry because again, they're still at historically low levels.
Yeah. So on the, if that's sort of a teeter-totter of inflation with interest rates, let's start with the inflation side of it, or focus a little bit there. Do you see, with inflation, I would think the cost of goods sold for the MSPs is rising, like the cost to deliver those services is rising. So is it a natural step for the MSPs to be raising their per user or per seat or overall contracts right now in terms of what they're charging the end customer?
Yeah, I mean, the advice that we've been giving to the MSPs is threefold, and they don't necessarily need to give me the advice. They've been growing their businesses and running their businesses for 10, 20, 30 years at this point. But yeah, we're seeing MSPs increasing price anywhere from seeing, anecdotally from 7 to 15%. We're also seeing other MSPs, Joe, increase price as much as 20% or more when they're going to their customer base and saying, hey, I'm going to add additional security services. So some MSPs we're finding are increasing their price solely on really the consumer price index and saying, hey, cost of inflation has gone up. And that's between that 7 to 15%. We're seeing then the other MSPs going to the customer saying, look, prices are going up. We're going to be adding on additional security services for you. And you're going to be sharing in that to make you a more secure small, medium enterprise. So we're seeing it in two ways. The other thing, and we've had a couple of sessions with MSPs all over the globe on this, is focusing on automation and standardizing, right? Yeah. And so how can I leverage my team better? I'm be paying my labor force more. How can I leverage them more? And it's those two magic words, right? It's automate, 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 and then it's standardize, standardize, standardize. And the difference between the MSP in the upper quartile of profit and the median or the lower quartile, it's almost squarely on those two words. And then, the last one is that I'm telling folks is focus on developing your team. And because the cost of replacing your team is so high that if you can develop your younger talent and give them something meaty and interesting to do, and it doesn't need to be necessarily just giving them more money. It's like we call it like the love languages here at N-able, and how do we develop our folks, and we're the best MSPs are finding good ways to develop their talent, retain their talent, and really try to mitigate their labor.
Yeah, and how about you in terms of N-able and how you're navigating the inflation? Are your cost of goods going up as well? And like, will you need to pass on some increases to the MSPs? And if so, can you keep it at a nominal level or a nominal rate where it's below the industry norm, but still there's a little bit of an increase there?
Sure. No, it's a good question, and it's a fair one. It's ones that the MSPs will ping us on. And look, at the highest level, we are in the same ecosystem, right? We're seeing pressure on costs like our cyber insurance costs. We're seeing pressure on a bunch of costs on our labor costs. We continue, and you know this, Joe, we continue to invest in the business, and we've actually, as part of the spin here at N-able, brought down our profit to invest more, adding more resources, giving more, building out our security practice, making sure the products are more robust, durable, secure. And so that comes at a cost. And so we try to practice what we preach, in that how do we automate? How do we leverage our organizations? How do we focus on the things? And yeah, we also look at price increases. I think we've had a really consistent, measured approach to price increases over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. We'll have a similar kind of methodology really this year, and as we look to pass on, some of that cost. But my hope and my goal and my message to my team is, let's make sure with that price increase comes an up-leveling of commitment and promise on the quality of the product and security of our product and these additional offerings. How are we making the products better so that the MSPs then can go generate a better return, and as they try to grow their top line and their bottom line. And so we'll practice a lot of those same things that we look at. We'll look at price increases. We'll look at looking to automate our folks, but at the highest level, we're continuing to invest in our business in R&D and in customer success. Sure. Got it.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the other side of that teeter-totter now. We talked about inflation, but then there's the interest rate hikes on the other side of that to try and offset the inflation, right? we're early days. Obviously, we've only seen one increase. It's March, but the Fed's talking about multiple long-term increases. I have a thesis that I want to bounce off you, and actually, you and I were talking about this off camera, so I think we're on the same page. But I just want to share it with our viewers and listeners. And the thesis that you and I were talking about was, okay, let's say interest rates do keep going up, right? Theoretically, that makes it more expensive for private equity firms to borrow money and go buy MSPs, right? So if it's more expensive for the MSPs, for the private equity firms to borrow money and go acquire the MSPs, that means the private equity firm may have to pay a little bit of a lower multiple to get that MSP. So when I first was thinking about this, I'm like, oh no, MSPs may see their valuations get pressured. And then I took a step back and I'm like, but wait a minute. If an MSP is able to focus on just growing that EBITDA and doing that every year in a recurring way, even if the multiple comes down now a little bit, your top line sale price can still go up, correct?
Yeah, and it's what I'm seeing even as a public company CEO is that there's been especially in the last 90 days, is a refocusing on this mix of profit and growth. And I think you said it perfectly, Joe, right? So at N-able, we aspire to be a rule of 50 company. And what does that mean for our listeners? That's like our revenue growth number and that EBITDA, that profit number. You put those two together, if you're a software company and those two numbers add up to 40, combine your growth and your profit, you've got something special. We try to be a little bit better than that and try to aspire to be something like that starts with a 5. But that really is that good balance between profit and growth. And I'm seeing a lot of folks, investors, asking me about N-able, asking me about the industry, asking me about MSPs with a lot more focus on that profit. And the profit never goes out of style. Sometimes growth comes in and out of style, but profitability never comes out of style. And if an MSP is focused on maximizing their EBITDA and growing their business, showing a consistent growth pattern and showing an EBITDA number, you're right. But to your other point, Joe, I do think as money gets a little bit more expensive, and again, we're at historic lows. We're at absolutely historic lows. Both private equity, but even MSPs that are looking to grow inorganically might need to sharpen up their business case a little bit, making sure that they've got that return, because financial institutes, banks, and the others will start looking at it. Okay, now money costs a little bit more. How does that business case look like? So I think it'll put a little bit more pressure on the business case, especially the ones that don't necessarily have that clean path to profitability. If you can get that healthy debt, what they call it, debt to net income ratio, to be at a healthy clip, then you should still continue to see strong multiples and valuations in the industry for sure.
Got it. Excellent. Okay. So listen, I think we've covered the financial portion of the conversation, but it's actually I'm going to give you an entryway here. A lot of our viewers and listeners are already familiar with the fact that this is a wine podcast, a Pinot with Pag, a Pinot with Pag winecast. And so, so far we've talked about, well, first of all, yeah. What are we drinking today? Edict.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. So I believe it's a Pinot Noir from the Anderson Valley. It's a 2018. We always get questions as like, we don't give enough of a description. So I'll show folks the label.
Right.
I'll just, and so the wine's called Edict.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons we that you chose this, and we were bouncing it off each other ahead of the podcast, was so what is the Edict for MSPs? And it remains unchanged regardless of the economy. It's continue on that path to maximize profits and mitigate risk, and widen the delta between the two continually, and your valuation will go up, no doubt. So that's the Edict. We've already talked about sort of maximizing profits amid this interest rate scenario, amid the inflation rate scenario, but we haven't talked about mitigating risk, which shifts us to the security conversation. And before we get into security, Salute, great to see you.
Salute.
Cling, virtual. So security. Listen, I could go down a million different paths here, but are there any top level bullet points you wanted to hit?
So look, what's going on in the world, I think just puts another security kind of top of mind for folks, right? And on a bunch of different fronts. And but you're right, that balance of risk and profit is very top of mind. That same 32 MSPs that I was talking to in the Raleigh office from Canada and eastern part of the United States, we spent a good amount of time talking about risk and risk management. And for them, it's a balance of going to their companies and their customers with a full suite. I believe, Joe, at this point in time, MSPs fully grok the concept of layered security. I think between, I'd like to think a lot with your efforts, our efforts, the other efforts of others in the industry. People know that it's not one magic pill to make you secure, that it is a layered security approach. So we're seeing more and more MSPs adopting a more fulsome view, whether it be adopting MFA, whether it be endpoint security coupled with backup, coupled with mail security, coupled with anti-phishing kind of attempts and training. We're seeing that layered security approach, which is great. And we're actually seeing small, medium enterprise understand where they fit in the risk profile. I think for MSPs, the big bit, and we just did this big study, and this is available for folks, and I think you've helped kind of even propagate the study to some degree as well. MSPs have now leapfrogged small, medium enterprises primary targets for the bad guys, right? And so the bad guys have kind of woken up to this idea that if I gain access to the MSP themselves, I gain access to more than one small, medium enterprise. And so that is definitely in the forefront. Unfortunately, our surveys suggest that 90%, think about that number, 90% of MSPs have suffered a successful cyber attack in the last 18 months, right? Yeah. Like, that's a startling number. 90%, 90 out of 100 folks, right, of MSPs. And so it's top of mind. It potentially can go from an inconvenience to an extinction event for MSPs. So the challenge is twofold, and you and I know this. It's protecting our customers, their data, their businesses, and then protecting the MSP's business. And N-able has a big part of that as well. We have to make sure that the MSPs are informed, but that they're also protected. And then the attacks on the MSP's customers are on the rise. I think our data suggests that that's even up 80%, which these are startling numbers off of big numbers. So that layered security approach is key. We continue to do a couple things. We continue to harden our own security operations, but we also continue to bring things to market. And earlier in Q1, we brought a DNS filtering offering to help MSPs thwart that internet kind of connection as bad guys were coming in. Someone would open up an email, go to a nefarious website, and off you go, and off into the races you go, right? So thinking about all these multiple vectors that the bad guys can come in and infiltrate, we're helping to give MSPs at least offerings to help offset some of that risk.
So here's a naive question for you, actually, and it has to do with threat intelligence. So your CISO is kind enough to join me in a week. He'll be on a industry neutral, webcast, not pitching products or anything, but talking more about shared threat intelligence and the type of work that's going on between CISOs at multiple MSP software companies that may cooperate on some days, but also compete on others. Do you see an improved climate of information sharing, of threat mitigation across the MSP ecosystem, including the software vendors at this point?
Sure, and I don't want to provide too much of a spoiler alert, because I think that's going to be a fantastic forum and webinar, and I really encourage everyone from the community to chime in. And you're right, this is Dave McKinnon, who's our CISO, will be joining the CISOs from ConnectWise and Kaseya and Datto. And I think it'll be a great share for the MSP community, and I think it'll be fun. And Dave is one of our thought leaders in security space. And so, not to give too much of a spoiler alert, but yeah, there's a good amount of sharing that goes on at the industry. But here's the reality. Here's where we can do better. Right now, it's because those CISOs, Dave and the others, have taken it upon themselves, and they have the foresight and the level of sophistication and camaraderie for the betterment of the MSP community to share and build a relationship, and making sure that if one entity sees something, making sure that the others are aware, which is fantastic. I think we could probably do more, formalize it a little bit more, and elevate that story, and have it go beyond, and a little bit covered a broader ecosystem. But I think people will see, if they tune into that webinar, a tremendous amount of respect for one another, and a tremendous amount of at least thought sharing and intel sharing within that group.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think I'll learn a lot, and I think the community will learn a lot, without a doubt. Okay, so I think we covered security. I have one more sort of theme or topic to hit you up with, and that is consolidation. And I want to clarify that, because sometimes when people hear the word consolidation, they think about shrinking, and this isn't about shrinking. This is about potential M&A in a growing market that continues to grow. From your vantage point, what does consolidation mean to the MSPs? What should they be thinking about?
Sure. For me, that word triggers a couple of different thoughts, right? And so I don't view consolidation as necessarily a bad thing, as long as the thesis of the acquisition or the merger to be one that is going to be accretive to the community and going to be accretive to the MSPs themselves, right? So big private equity shops, large enterprises, and they recognize that the MSP community provides this golden access path to the small, medium enterprise.
Right.
And that's a huge, rich market. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more of consolidation that might be a hybrid, where you see an enterprise company and an MSP company or something of that nature. Why? Because folks recognize that access, that path that we as vendors and you as the MSPs have to that small, medium enterprise. So that's one front. On the other front, Joe, consolidation is also for the MSPs. Yeah. And you're so right to say, like, consolidation, people think it usually means getting smaller. I got in this industry in 2013, beginning part of 2013, and I kind of thought the same thing. And in the MSP land, if two MSPs consolidate, that doesn't necessarily mean it goes smaller. In fact, I would argue that means the TAM of the market gets bigger, because as MSPs continue to merge and they grow their platform, they grow their maturity, their sophistication, their scale, they're going up market. Yeah. MSPs are now walking into Fortune 1000 companies, mid-market enterprises, opportunities that were never there for MSPs before. A lot of that's because of the consolidation. So I believe actually some of this consolidation at the MSP level is increasing the TAM, your TAM, to go out and win bigger deals. And I look at that as a net tailwind for me and N-able, but also for the MSP community. So those are the two ways I think about consolidation in the market.
Got it. And I just thought of one other term that I want to bring up before I let you go. And it's related to consolidation, and it's almost the flip side, and that's incubation. And what I mean by that is, let me give you a scenario. I hear from software startups that sometimes get frustrated because they reach out to venture capital firms. VCs increasingly understand the MSP model, but not all of them. So these software startups, they're looking for investors that really understand the MSP model, so that they don't have to explain it over and over again, and the investor supports the model, right? So that's my long-winded way of saying, what are your thoughts on incubation? Does N-able, are you looking at helping to incubate companies, maybe invest in them here and there, and help them grow to become the next platform players?
Yeah, you're bringing your A game today. This is like, we're going from inflation to, geez, this is like it's a great. I feel like you're prepping me for my Wall Street conversations. It's a great question.
Yeah.
It's one that we think about. You and I actually, I think, had a conversation maybe about 3 years ago when we talked about private equity money and some of the private equity shops buying other MSPs. And I recall making a kind of a bet on the future, in that more and more PE money coming into the ecosystem will be healthy short-term and long-term, because venture capital money will be a fast follow. And I'd like to think I was right. We're seeing more venture capital money coming in and investing in purpose-built products for our MSPs. And so that's good for the MSP community now, because more and more venture capital money are saying, hey, look, if I start up a company or give them a founder some investment to grow his company that's purpose built for the MSP, I, as a venture capitalist, can get a return because the market's big enough, it's thriving, and I can get multiples off of my money. That's a good thing. Yeah. What that means for the MSP is more purpose-built tools for them. What that means for N-able is, as I look at our pain points, we're always looking to see how we can support our North Star. And our North Star is to help empower these MSPs. And so, Joe, if I have to build something or partner with somebody or buy something to help with that North Star, we'll do that. As part of the spin, one of the main reasons why we spawned from SolarWinds was to get a little bit more acquisitive and focus on purpose-built properties for the MSP. So I look to be acquisitive in 2022. It's a muscle that I'm looking forward to exercising. And as part of a standalone company that's purpose-built to bring more goodness to the MSP community. So I think it's good. There's more venture capital money. There's more properties. There's more offerings and solutions being brought to life purposely for the MSP community.
Yeah,
which is I think going to be a target-rich environment for companies like N-able, and hopefully that means better integrated solutions for the MSPs, so they can, back to that Edict thing, really maximize their profits, minimize their risk, go with the vendor that has a platform that has the right level of scale, so they know if they're going with a company of that type of stature, they've got that all the scale and maturity behind it. So I think it's a net tailwind for the community for sure.
Fantastic. Well, tell you what, John, I think I'm questioned out for a change. So I just want to thank you again, as usual, for your time, your insights, and just, having an unscripted dialogue with me where we just rap a little bit together. I appreciate it.
No, Joe, it's always great.